Welcome to California Now, a podcast produced by Visit California. I'm Soterios Johnson. This episode is all about gold country. We'll start things off by exploring the region's rich history, including some ways you can relive the past. Then we'll head to the mountains east of Sacramento with Preeti Chandrasekhar, who runs the Eager Traveler blog.
I was looking for a destination where I could combine the outdoors plus, some small historic towns, some boutique shopping, maybe even some wine tasting. While I didn't expect Gold Country to have all of it, that's exactly what I found.
We'll also look into the amazing restaurant, brewery, and dessert scene in and around Sacramento.
Oh my goodness. Ginger Elizabeth chocolates is just off the charts great. They are the pride of Sacramento's dessert world.
That's all coming up on California Now. California has a rich, fascinating, and complex history, and there's no better place to explore it than Sacramento and Gold Country. From the people who inhabited the area long before the gold rush to Ronald Reagan's stint as governor, the region is full of noteworthy places to visit. Marcia Eymann is the city historian at the Center for Sacramento History, and she's here to tell us about a few of those key places. Welcome to California Now, Marcia.
Thank you. Thank you.
So I wanted to skip across the landscape and through history with you a little bit, starting with the people who were in the Sacramento area long before it was a city. Who were the early inhabitants, and what was life like for them?
The inhabitants early on, way before the Americans came on the scene, were Native Americans, first of all, and they were here for over 900 years before even Sutter came on the scene. And they lived a very good life because they lived off the land and they also understood it. And they would migrate according to seasons. For example, they knew to move away from the rivers in the wintertime, and they were able to survive and live very well, quite honestly, because it was a very bountiful area with as far as the rivers and fish and wildlife and so forth for them to sustain and grow in a very active community.
So they had a very kind of thriving culture here. Where can I go to experience some of that history?
If you wanted to learn more about the Native Americans here in California, right now there is a museum at Sutter's Fort, the California Indian Museum, which is right outside the gates of the fort. That is a temporary location. The state is now working to build a much larger museum that will be in West Sacramento that will tell the broader story of California Indians, not only in the Sacramento region, but all throughout California, which is a fascinating story because Native American populations in California were as diverse then as they are now, but also as the whole population of California is. So going up and down California, you experience many different cultures and many different groups, and that museum will celebrate all of them.
So you mentioned the two major rivers. There's the Sacramento and the American River. They kind of dominate Sacramento's geography. Is it safe to say they also play an outsized role in the region's history throughout time?
You can't talk about the Sacramento area without talking about the rivers. There's that old story, location, location, location. And it's all about the rivers. The reason the Native Americans were here is because the rivers were what they needed for water resources, but also they fished the waters and got their food from there. And they also used it as transportation. Same thing as the Anglos come in, as the United States took control of California. The water was the freeways of the 19th century. And they were so essential for transportation of goods and people that Sacramento exists because it's located at the confluence of those two rivers, the American and the Sacramento.
Oh, that's interesting. So where can I go outside? Say I wanted to stretch my legs and appreciate that side of the city. Where could I do that?
The best way probably to explore that, if you wanted to explore the river, is to go on the American River Trail, which you can pick up in Old Sacramento. It will take you all the way up to Folsom, and it's got markers along the way. It's just strikingly beautiful to go along the American River, which is one of the most beautiful rivers. A friend of mine came to visit me a few months back, and we went down to the American River, and she said, people travel all over the world to see something that's as beautiful as this, which is the truth. It's absolutely gorgeous.
Yeah. So what are you seeing when you're walking or riding that trail? What are people seeing?
What you see is a very curvy, the American River is carved out of rock. It moves around and curves quite a bit as it goes through, but the sides of the river are very lush, especially if we've had a good rainy season. But even then, most of it is surrounded by trees. You're going to go in and out of different developed areas, but a large portion of it, you're a part of nature. And that ride up to Folsom, which all along that way, particularly between Rancho Cordova and Folsom, it's beautiful, especially this time of year in the fall. It's a spectacular view, but you get that, you can have an idea of what it looked like because it hasn't changed that much in most areas of what it looked like in 1849 when the 49ers came here trying to make it rich.
And we're talking about the 49ers back in 1849, right? The Gold Rush.
Yeah,
people.
not the football team.
You know, a lot of people might not think of Sacramento as a port city, but it was, and it still is a port city even today, right?
Yes, Sacramento is still a port city. It operates as a port. And I think it's really, when you go think of the Gold Rush era and how the state evolved, the two most significant cities at the beginning when we first became state in 1850 were San Francisco and Sacramento. San Francisco was the ocean port, Sacramento was the river port. And so if you were to have come to California for the gold rush, if you had come around the Horn across the isthmus and come up by ship, you would have gotten off in San Francisco. You most likely would have gotten on another ship and come up the Sacramento River into Sacramento. You would have gotten off there and you would have walked the rest of the way because the American River wasn't navigable. And that's how goods came in. And so this huge economy was developed in Sacramento and San Francisco as these strategic port cities that became a significant port city now after that because of the goods that were coming out from Sacramento, which would mean that all the produce and things that were being produced here would go on a ship and go back down to the Bay Area and take care of that large population that's in that area. Or when the Transcontinental Railroad was completed in 1869, it started to be shipped across countries, establishing Sacramento as the fruit and vegetable basket of the nation. And it held that for many, many years. We still ship out a large portion of fruit and vegetables from this area.
So, Marcia, let's keep skipping around. What is Old Sacramento like? What's it like to go to? And what's the historic moment it gives me a window back to?
Old Sacramento is the largest grouping of Gold Rush era buildings in California. And it's a really unique place because it's on the National Register, but it's also a National Historic Landmark because of the Gold Rush, because of its transportation history, because that was the first terminus of the Transcontinental Railroad, but also because it was the first terminus for the telegraph when it was connected to the rest of the country, and then also for the Pony Express. So it has that very centralized, essential role that it played.
Right. And Old Sacramento is kind of a very concentrated neighborhood, right, of several blocks where you can almost immerse yourself in the old architecture, and there's some museums down there as well.
Yes, there's the Railroad Museum is down, the California State Railroad Museum, which is I think it's either the first or second largest railroad museum in the United States. It's really an amazing place. And if you like trains, and just it's an experience, no matter even, and I think after you leave there, you will like trains. It's really quite amazing. The other thing is that we do offer tours of the original underground level. So you can get a tour that tells you about and takes you down into the original street levels of the city and tells you the story of the flooding and kind of how the city was transformed with this construction project that started in 1861 and went on into the early 1870s to raise the city and protect it.
I want to hear more about this underground tour. How does it work?
The thing that's really good about it is that it shows you how you can go through the city and see that other landscape. So you can go, because they raised the streets and buildings for multiple blocks all the way almost to the Capitol, that in order to protect the city from flooding. And so like if you were to continue down K Street, you can look down on side alleyways and so forth and look down to the original grade of the city. So the tours explain that and tell you how the streets and buildings were raised and why it looks the way it does today. It's really an amazing piece of construction that took place in order to sustain the city and the location that it's at.
So are the underground tours still going on right now during the pandemic?
We had just started them up again. We do have online, you can take a virtual tour. If you go to the Sacramento History Museum site, you can do it virtually, is something that we're offering now. But there's nothing like going to the real place to be able to see it and touch it. And hopefully we'll be able to open up next year.
So, with all this history, I imagine that Sacramento's cemeteries are probably fascinating places, are they?
Yes. Well, I believe that when you go into any community, you should check out the cemetery because you'll find out how old it is and what the people did, where the people were from. And Sacramento's historic Old City Cemetery, which was established in 1849 before the city was incorporated as a city. John Sutter Jr., Sutter's son, donated the land to the city. It was all part of civilizing the area. The original pioneers believed that they were bringing civilization to the wilderness. And one of the signs of civilization was how you treated your dead. And so the cemetery that was established at the time was based on what was called a garden cemetery, which had started back in Auburn, New York. And they really are this country's first parks because they were designed, they're raised plots, and it was actually quite competitive at the time so that whoever owned that plot was equally trying to compete with their neighbor to say, I take better care of my deceased and I have more beautiful flowers. And the city helped to maintain that. They had as many as 20 gardeners on duty at sometimes during the 19th century. By the 1880s, it was described as this lush place. And today it still has beautiful flowers. And actually this year is going to be kind of a unique thing because for the first time in about 20 years, the roses will be blooming in the winter. And so around Christmas, if you go down there, you'll be able to see roses blooming in the cemetery because we've brought in a rose expert that is trimming them back so they bloom more often, which is really quite spectacular when it happens.
Marcia, before we wrap up, let's talk about the state capitol. The state capitol building is downtown. It's got really beautiful architecture. It's surrounded by tall palm trees. It's a really great place to just walk around. What should I keep my eyes peeled for while I'm there?
Well, the state capitol, the grounds are beautiful with a series of different gardens, but also different monuments and so forth. And one that always has struck me is the Vietnam Memorial that was created. It was done by a California sculptor, and it's really quite beautiful and moving.
What does it look like?
It's two soldiers that are standing looking out, and then it's modeled after the Vietnam Memorial in DC in the sense that it has names of all the people that served in Vietnam from California and that lost their lives. The thing that's really striking is you see that what a large portion of Latino Californians went and lost their lives during the Vietnam War. But it's a very moving thing to see. The other thing is to go into the Capitol itself. They have rooms that are set up that are period that show you what it looked like when the Capitol was first constructed. They do changing exhibits there on a regular basis. So there's always something different to look at. And then it's always like, for me, when I first came, the Rotunda area is beautiful, but going around and looking at all of the portraits of the different governors and kind of seeing who's been in power and actually seeing who ran the state at different times. So it's a very special and amazing building.
Yeah, it's definitely a building with a lot of history. So if you're a history buff, you definitely want to hit it.
Yes, unquestionably.
Well, Marcia, this has been really great. Thank you so much for joining us on California Now.
My pleasure.
Marcia Eymann is the city historian at the Center for Sacramento History, online at centerforsacramentohistory.org. As always, we'll have links to all the places we talked about on today's episode and lots more on our website, visitcalifornia.com/podcast. This is California Now. California's Gold Country region in the mountains east of Sacramento is full of hidden gems. That makes it exactly the type of place my next guest loves to explore. Preeti Chandrasekhar runs the blog The Eager Traveler, and she makes a point of visiting places that are a little off the beaten path. She tells us about a recent excursion she took to Gold Country to enjoy the fresh air, history, wine, and great food. Welcome to California Now, Preeti.
Thank you, Soterios. So excited to be here chatting with you today.
I really love your blog, The Eager Traveler, where the tagline is, "Take the path less traveled." What inspired you to start blogging about your trips?
Everybody's been to a Paris or a Tokyo or a Bangkok, right? But there are the lesser known destinations that I think are a lot harder to Google or a lot harder to explore. And I think that's one of the things that really attracted me to blogging is I want to talk about some of the things that are harder to find online. And I want to talk about some of the things that are just as beautiful as some of those, well-known destinations because a lot of them are hiding a lot of hidden gems.
Yeah, and based on that, Gold Country seems like the perfect destination for you, right?
Absolutely. I was looking for a destination where I could combine the outdoors plus, some small historic towns, some boutique shopping, maybe even some wine tasting. While I didn't expect Gold Country to have all of it, that's exactly what I found.
So I want to talk about some of the places you visited on this trip, starting with Placerville. What did you make of this small town in El Dorado County?
So I had no idea Placerville even existed. This was my first trip down there. It's only about 2 hours away from San Francisco, and it's a charming historic town. Some will tell you it's haunted. A lot of the local people that we met said that, okay, this is haunted, that's haunted. So there's a spot there called the Historic Carey House Hotel. You have to go there. You have to stay there for a night. And then there's these really cute boutique shops like the Winter Hill Olive Oil. So basically you'll have a whole bunch of olive oil tastings. They still do the tastings minus the bread to accommodate for the pandemic. Such a fabulous experience. You get organic olive oil, get the orange flavor one because they're great in brownies. You have Diedrich's cheese, which is both locally produced as well as, they get it imported from Italy and France. You have to step into Bowtie Barbershop. This was like one of those older day barbershops, and I really felt like I was stepping into another era. And with all of this, if you get tired of walking around, then be sure to have lunch at Sweetie Pie's. It's a Victorian home with some amazing breakfast and lunch offerings, and of course, their pies. You've got to have a pie when you're at Sweetie Pie's.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about the food because I know that there's so many great places around Gold Country to eat. So what is so amazing about Sweetie Pies?
It's like walking into a little dreamland. And when you walk in, what's really charming is you do feel like you stepped into kind of like an old Victorian home. And it is a Victorian home. They have good vegetarian options as well as meat options. And they have a huge case full of pies if you want a little bit of dessert afterward.
What about another spot to grab a bite?
Oh, definitely they have a place there called Apple Hill, which is a collection of farms, and the Larson Apple Barn is fantastic. It's just about 10 minutes, I think, from Main Street. And they have a number of places where you can grab their award-winning ciders, apple crisps, also pies. And it was honestly my first time having an apple crisp at the Larson Apple Barn. It was amazing.
So are a lot of these places, I'm imagining they must have safe options for social distancing, either whether you're dining outdoors or doing takeout.
Absolutely. And that's the one thing that I was really particular about is when I visit, I wanted to be sure that I was picking those safe places to go to. And everybody that I interviewed actually in Placerville, they were very, very specific. And they said, hey, if you're not wearing a mask, I'm not letting you into my store. It was wonderful to hear that. And it was also great to see people wearing masks and, walking around as well. So.
All right, cool. Let's talk a little bit about the town of Murphy's next. What are some highlights there?
Yeah, so Murphy's is another historic town. It's only about an hour and 30 minutes from Placerville, but it's located in the central Sierra Nevada foothills. So it's between Lake Tahoe and Yosemite National Park. So Murphy's was actually voted one of the top 10 coolest small towns by Budget Travel Magazine. And I can kind of see why. They have 25 wine tasting rooms right in downtown on its main street. But if you don't like wine, you can stop at the Poorhouse that serves beer and wine in a sprawling outdoor patio setting. So my two favorite wineries here actually are the Newsom Harlow wines and the Ironstone Vineyard. Both completely took me by surprise, especially Ironstone, because it's a sprawling winery. And it's great for social distancing, of course. But what's unique about that place is the Alhambra Theater pipe organ. So they have a room with the Alhambra Theater pipe organ, and that kind of takes you back to the formal ballrooms of like the Gold Rush era, if you will. And they have several activities right now that help you experience this organ. So, like, for example, they have a movie night with a live pianist. Of course, it's limited capacity due to the pandemic, but these are things that I would not expect out of a small town like Murphy's, right?
That's really cool. And what are some of the wines that are, indigenous to the area? Or what kind of wines are we going to be tasting when we go to these places?
So I think some of the, they have some of the greatest Zinfandel vineyards in the Sierra Foothills. I know a lot of the Spanish varietals are also great over there. You'll also find Cabs, Merlots. But really, as far as the stars of that area, I would say are the Spanish varietals and the Zinfandels.
Right. So say I wanted to pick up a few gifts on my trip. Where would you send me?
So Murphy's is fantastic for that. I would highly recommend the little shop called Moon Alley. It's a candle store, and they have handcrafted candles with some very unique designs. And I have never seen anything like this. It was also great to be able to support some local businesses. So I ended up buying a bunch of candles for gifts. But it's a really beautiful store, and I would highly, highly recommend this.
Hmm. Yeah, Murphy's is really close to Calaveras Big Trees State Park. Did you check that out at all?
I did, and that was the most surprising thing about Murphy's. It was 20 minutes away from the world's largest trees, right? The giant sequoias. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I had no idea Calaveras Big Tree State Park was there. And I would 100% recommend this, especially the North and the South Grove. They have plenty of hiking trails. Now, I just did the North Grove portion of the state park, but that's a great glimpse of some really giant trees if you're looking for that.
That's great. And now you finished your journey in Sonora in Tuolumne County. What can you tell us about that corner of Gold Country?
Yeah, it's just the next town from Murphy's, literally 30 minutes away. It's very fondly known as the Queen of the Southern Mines. So definitely lots of gold, was found here back in the day. What really amazed me about Sonora is that, of course, it has its cute, charming downtown. It's got some amazing restaurants. It's got a wonderful spa. But what really surprised me was urban hiking in Sonora. So there's a place called Dragoon Gulch, which is an urban trail. You walk right outside of downtown about, say, 15 minutes, and you're at the trailhead. There are a bunch of easy trails that takes you right to the top of the Vista View Trail, and you'll see the entire town of Sonora. And I did not expect that.
So it's an urban trail. It's in the town, but you're still kind of walking in kind of like a green park-like area?
Yeah, it's kind of like it's green. You've got, a whole bunch of trees that surround you, so you feel like you're in a forest. And the town is like literally a 15 to 20-minute walk away.
That's
So
really great.
yeah, that was completely surprising about Sonora. The other thing about Sonora also that's really fascinating is right next to Sonora is a little town called Columbia, and it's called the Columbia Historical State Park. So it's a living gold rush town. And visiting this town will give you a glimpse of what a 19th century town would have actually looked like. You can see merchants dressed in 1850s clothing, and you can even ride an authentic stagecoach around the town.
Oh, that's funny. That's
Yeah.
great. So where did you stay while you were there?
I stayed in the cutest bed and brunch run by a mother-daughter duo. It's called the Royal Olive Manor. And it's owned by a mother-daughter duo. It's a charming Victorian home, literally 10 minutes walking distance from all the restaurants in downtown. So the home has 4 bedrooms. And what makes this really charming is that each one is named after the 4 different women who owned the house during different eras. So the decor in each room will actually reflect each era and that particular woman that lived there.
Oh, that's really cool. And so we're talking about what, like 1800s through early 1900s kind of decor.
Exactly, exactly. And it's absolutely gorgeous. And you've got, most of the rooms have like a sitting room. They have like an attached bathroom. Some of them have separate entrances. And the house itself has 2 patios. So there's a sprawling backyard. There's a front patio. The front lawn has a hammock, a swing. And the best part about staying here, honestly, is that the ladies will make you brunch. They'll serve it either in your room or you can have it in the dining space downstairs.
Yeah, and I especially like, when I'm someplace, I like to be able to like park the car, then just walk everywhere because you really get a sense of the place. So being that the location is such that you can kind of really do that, I like that.
Absolutely. And it's easy parking, right? You just park right outside, like behind the house or in front of the house, and then you're set for the remainder. If you stay, you can just walk around wherever you want. It's just perfect.
Okay, let's talk a little bit more about food. We've got brunch set because we know we're going to be at the Royal Olive Manor.
Right.
What are some other places like should we fuel up as we plan or have our outdoor adventures?
So Diamondback Grill is a great option downtown. They have an outdoor patio. You can safely social distance. My favorite spot, however, was El Arroyo, which is right next to the creek. It's got fantastic Mexican food. And if you go down maybe, say, 10 minutes out of Sonora into Jamestown, you'll find Service Station, which is another charming restaurant. It's basically a physical reminder of the transportation evolution, the car culture, and the pop culture. It's a very fun place to dine in. But my ultimate favorite spot throughout this entire journey was the lunch that I had in the outside patio of the historic National Hotel in Jamestown. So Jamestown is like the next historic town, and it's got a very small historical street. And this particular hotel, they have Mediterranean cuisine, which I did not expect, and they have rooms for rent on the second level. But it's a historic hotel, so you're really stepping into that hotel. You feel like you're back in the gold rush days, except you're being served Mediterranean cuisine. So it's very charming, very unexpected, and some excellent food.
Yeah. And I think we'd be remiss to overlook how close Sonora is to Yosemite National Park. I could easily drive there from Sonora just to spend the day, right?
Yeah, and that's another surprise for me. I did not realize Sonora was simply 45 minutes away from, Yosemite National Park. And so I took the trip. I drove 45 minutes and I went to Yosemite, and I went to a lesser known part of Yosemite though called the Hetch Hetchy Valley. A lot of people probably don't know about this. It was very quiet, the non-touristy part of Yosemite National Park, but Yosemite-like views. So you're kind of getting the best of both worlds. And I went on this 5 mile round trip hike called the Wapema Falls. Highly recommend it. Again, I would say great for beginners. Pack yourself a lunch, have it out there, looking at the views, and it's absolutely spectacular.
Well, Preeti, this has really been great. Thank you so much for joining us on California Now.
Absolutely. Thank you for this opportunity. It was amazing.
Preeti Chandrasekhar runs the Eager Traveler blog at theeagertraveler.com. Her Instagram page is full of stunning photography. It's just Eager Traveler minus the R at the end. As always, we'll have links to all the places we talked about on today's episode and lots more on our website. Visit california.com/podcast. This is California Now. Situated smack dab in the middle of millions of acres of farmland, Sacramento has firmly established itself as America's farm to fork capital. The city and its surrounding areas boast renowned restaurants, world-class craft beers, and even a burgeoning hard cider scene. To help us understand how Sacramento has adjusted to the COVID-19 pandemic, we reached out to Nick Leonti, owner of the Leonti Group, a travel-focused marketing firm. He's here to highlight some of the best places to grab a bite or a drink in and around Sacramento, from patio dining to breweries to up-and-coming neighborhoods. Welcome to California Now, Nick.
Hi, thanks so much for having me.
So to start out, I know that 2020 has posed tremendous challenges for restaurants in general. How true is that in Sacramento?
Yeah, we've lost a lot of Sacramento classics here during the pandemic, which is kind of sad. The biggest one is probably Biba, which was our long-standing Italian restaurant here in Sacramento, run by Biba Caggiano, who actually passed away last year. But she was kind of our first celebrity chef in Sacramento. She had a cooking show back in the 90s, and her restaurant has been in Midtown Sacramento since the mid 80s. And so it's sad to learn that they won't be coming back. A favorite lunch spot of mine, Bud's Buffet, that's right downtown, a couple blocks from the Capitol. They're closed up forever. Sacramento's oldest restaurant, which is called Espanol in East Sacramento, they were just about to come up on their 100th anniversary, and they're not going to quite make it. So a lot of sad stories like that. But there's also new things popping up, and a new wave of Sacramento restaurants that are becoming the classics in town. Where Sacramento's perfect for outdoor dining, so all summer long it was actually pretty nice. Like, we had all these new patios to enjoy our favorite restaurants.
Well, I mean, and Sacramento is really it's a wonderful city in that it's like a very human scaled city. Like there are really great neighborhoods, there are really great restaurants, and one trend that we've observed is a lot of places have really gotten creative. What are some examples of that in Sacramento? Would you say?
Well, I know right out of the gates we were doing a lot of the takeout type dining, and then you see again people changing their patios, adding more heaters, things like that. Has been great. We've a great addition from the pandemic, one that I hope sticks around, is the to-go cocktail. You couldn't ever do that before,
Right,
so that's
right.
one perk. There was a rule where you had to buy food, so I know some of the bars where they'd sell you a bag of peanuts for $1, and you could walk out of there with your pina colada or whatever. But a lot of, like I mentioned, a lot of nice new outdoor dining places like Tank House Barbecue, and it's owned by the same people who have the Tiki Bar called the Jungle Bird. They've modified their locations and they're really nice additions there, which is good.
What would you say are some of your go-to places right now? I mean, if you had somebody coming into town to visit, where would you want to take them to say, you really have to experience this place?
The place I go to regularly is called the Shack, properly named. That is an accurate name for the Shack. It's been a few different establishments over the years, but the place has been a restaurant of some kind since I think the 30s. And now it's a great place for craft beer, and they have a great outdoor patio in a nice, real walkable, quiet East Sacramento neighborhood. So just sitting out on the patio and enjoying the foods, it's sandwiches, but they're great sandwiches and great burgers. The clam chowder is amazing. There's a kind of a pizza and pasta place, bike themed. It's called One Speed. That's a neighborhood favorite. Great coffee at Chocolate Fish. The old gourmet Italian grocery store called Cordy Brothers is still going strong, and it's right down the street. So that's a great neighborhood that you can hit a number of things. And speaking of a newer restaurant, right next to the Shack is a very upscale restaurant called Alora. Upscale, but still welcoming in a neighborhood type place. They are a great like Italian seafood restaurant with an amazing wine list. The head chef there, who's also the owner, was formerly the head chef at the Firehouse restaurant, which is a real classic Sacramento restaurant in the old Sacramento area. So he's opened up his own place with his wife, and it's fantastic.
What about if I'm looking for something sweet, maybe a memorable place for a dessert?
Oh my goodness, I Ginger Elizabeth chocolates is just off the charts great. They are the pride of Sacramento's dessert world. They make fantastic chocolates of all kinds, especially around the holidays. Like right now, you could go get a chocolate Santa Claus if you wanted. They're making those types of
Huh.
things, but regularly you can get they do everything from ice cream and chocolate chip cookies. One of their most popular items is a macaron ice cream sandwich,
Wow.
this salted caramel one that's just fantastic. And then in the colder weather, they do a Oaxacan hot chocolate that is the most chocolatey thing you've ever tasted. It's got like a homemade marshmallow on it. The whole place just smells great. And their original shop is located on L Street in Sacramento. And then during the pandemic, they opened up more of a bakery, a patisserie type place that I haven't been to yet. And that is on J near 24th Street, which there are a few dessert options there as well, including Rick's Dessert Diner, which has been a Sacramento classic for decades now, which is always full of cakes and pies and ice cream sundaes. And it's kind of a fun 1950s retro vibe to it.
Right. All they serve are desserts, right?
Yes, just desserts. That doesn't mean that I haven't been there for lunch
Right.
though. Like I'll eat an ice cream sundae for lunch for sure.
Right, exactly. That's great. All right, let's move on to beer, craft beer right now. The Sacramento area has tons of breweries. Can you tell me a little bit about a few that you really, really like, places that are still serving despite the pandemic?
My top choice in town is Urban Roots, which I think just makes the most fantastic beer in town, or maybe anywhere in the state or beyond. The owner there, Rob Archie, he so his story said he played professional basketball in Europe 20 years ago or whatever, for a year, and that's where his eyes were open to the world of beer. Being in Belgium, learning about all those old time European beers, and he
Right.
came back to Sacramento and opened up Pangea, which is in the Curtis Park neighborhood. They have a great kitchen, making great food, and they also, showcased a lot of the local Sacramento beers as well. So then a few years ago, he branched off from that and started his own brewery and barbecue place called Urban Roots, and brought in a local brew maker who's been making beer forever. Great beer, really focus on. They make great saison style beers, which I'm a big fan of. They're one of the few places that makes like a Belgian quad beer locally. But they make a ton of different styles, and they're all fantastic, and the atmosphere is great. They've got a really good look in a great space in downtown Sacramento.
Yeah, what's the experience like there right now, with the pandemic? I mean, do they have an outdoor area? What is the experience like when you go there to hang out?
They've always had a great patio area in front of the brewery there, so that's still going strong. And then they've actually taken over a parking lot behind the building, so they have more patio space. Basically, put on your mask, go inside and order, and then take your beer and wait for the food to come to you. So it's pretty normal, actually. It feels pretty normal. I always sat outside there anyhow, so
Right, right.
so that one feels pretty normal to me. And again, it's great, just great beer there.
And now we have this new scene, burgeoning in the area. Hard cider is
Right.
getting this growing following. Can you tell us a bit about Sacramento's cider scene?
So I want to say, like, Sacramento has kind of a claim to being a leader in cider. We have a place still around, Two Rivers Cider, and they've been in operation since the '90s, which is even preceding the craft beer craze that really seems to have hit maybe 15 years ago. So they predated that. And one of their former cider makers has spun off and made his own cider company called Nitty's Cider. It's Nitty. And he's making some really great ciders right now and has a close relationship with Two Rivers. And we also have, some of the big cider makers. Common Cider is located just up the hill in Auburn, using our locally grown apples. North Canyon Cider up in Apple Hill, the Apple Hill area, just outside of Placerville. So I feel like hard cider's having its day here. And it gets lumped in a lot with craft beer. We do have all those great craft breweries here. I think we have over 70 breweries. Then you add in, five or six hard cider places, and that's pretty nice.
Nick, craft beer is so big throughout Gold Country in general. Are there any other places that are just must visits?
Of course there are, yeah. There's some fantastic breweries in those areas. Some of my favorites are Placer County of Moonraker, which has won a ton of awards all across the country, and Knee Deep Brewing is one of the bigger ones up there. I also really love off of Highway 50 headed up towards Placerville and South Lake Tahoe. There's the town of El Dorado Hills, and they have a great brewery called Mraz, Mraz, which does all the sour beers that are really popular right now. I love those. So
How far away are these places from Sacramento?
less than an hour for all these places that we claim as Sacramento breweries. Like you could be at the El Dorado Hills in 25 minutes, and then going up the other way, Moonraker is in Auburn, which is maybe 40 minutes away at the most. And again, it's like you're in a whole different place there. Sacramento, I think the elevation in Sacramento is about 18 feet above sea level, and these places in the gold country where the gold was back in the day, you start getting that's where the foothills start. So you get up to elevations around 2,000 feet before you head on up to South Lake Tahoe.
That's really great. So I'm just outside of Sacramento and I'm always looking for new neighborhoods to check out. Can you talk about some of the less heralded communities in the Sacramento area? Like, where do you like to go?
There's a lot of up and coming neighborhoods, especially across the river in West Sacramento. There's a lot popping up over there. It started 20 years ago when they built our minor league baseball park on the river there in West Sacramento, just on the other side of the Tower Bridge from the historic district of Old Sacramento. And from there, it's just grown. There's a nice little old town that's been redone. There's a pizza place called La Crusta that I really like there, an ice cream place called Devil May Care. So a nice little cluster of dining and sweets and things. And then there's a great new place called the Barn. I call it new. It's probably been there for 4 years now, but I've been here a long time, so that's still new. But the barn is a great facility right on the river, where Drake's Brewing has taken that over, and they have all their beer and they do pizzas, and it's right on the river, and they do a lot of events out there. But it's a great venue for that type of thing because all the great outdoor space, the great views of the river, and the Tower Bridge right there in the distance.
What about Curtis Park?
Curtis Park is another favorite of mine. That's where I mentioned Pangea, the beer cafe, is right there in Curtis Park, and it's a really old neighborhood. You've got the great old trees that Sacramento's known for, cute little bungalow type houses, and then you have establishments like Pangea, which is right across the street from a famous ice cream place in town called Gunther's Ice Cream. Just a really another place that's just really close to downtown, but you get more of the neighborhood vibe that Sacramento is famous for. Those nice old houses and the beautiful trees. That's Sacramento to me, is that type of experience, sitting outside with a nice beer and an ice cream. You can't beat that, right?
Right, exactly. Well, Nick, this has really been great. Thank you so much for coming on. I'm definitely going to be hitting some of these spots that you've shared. Thanks so much for joining us on California Now.
Yeah, it's been my pleasure. Great. Always happy to talk about Sacramento.
Nick Leonti is a tourism industry veteran and authority on all things good to eat and drink in and around Sacramento. He's on Twitter at nleonti, that's NLEONTI, and online at leontigroup.com. As always, we'll have links to all the places we talked about on today's episode and lots more on our website, visitcalifornia.com/podcast. This is California Now. Thank you for listening to California Now. We hope you enjoyed this episode about Gold Country and get a chance to hit the road soon. This podcast is produced by Visit California. I'm your host, Soterios Johnson. You can find our show on iTunes and Stitcher. Please subscribe. If we've inspired you to plan an excursion to Gold Country, I want to add one more stop to your itinerary. Do yourself a favor and visit the California Welcome Center located on High Street in Auburn. This facility, like other welcome centers throughout the state, is staffed with personal travel concierges who can answer your questions, make recommendations, and otherwise enrich your experience. Find out more online at visitcalifornia.com/welcome-centers.